I've always believed that families aren't built on blood, they're built on trust. My name's Samuel. I'm 29 years old, single, and living in a modest two-bedroom apartment a couple of hours outside my hometown. I work in property law, not flashy or high-paying, but it's steady, and I'm good at it. I've always been the type who stays out of drama. Quiet kid, straight A student, first one to get a degree in our family, never made waves. My younger sister, Olivia, though, she's the sun to my shadow. Blonde, bubbly, outgoing. The kind of person who can post a blurry beach selfie and get 300 likes in 10 minutes. She's 2 years younger than me, and, for as long as I can remember, the world has always kind of bent itself around her, especially when it came to our parents. Growing up, it was the usual story. She got the new iPhone on launch day while I was still using the old hand-me-down with a cracked screen. Her school trips were fully funded with shopping money on the side, while I had to mow lawns just to afford the bus fare. I never made a fuss. I figured that's just how things were. That maybe, because I was the older one, I was supposed to be the selfless one. Or maybe I didn't need as much attention. Or maybe, and this thought would hit me more often than I care to admit, I just wasn't as lovable. We grew up in this charming, slightly outdated colonial-style home on Sycamore Lane. 3 bedrooms, squeaky floorboards, and a giant oak tree out front that I used to climb when I needed space. It wasn't huge, but it was home. The kind of place you imagined your kids growing up in someday. Our mom had painted a height chart on the inside of the pantry door, little lines marking our growth spurts over the years. Our dad used to spend Sunday mornings fixing things that didn't really need fixing, just to feel like he was still in control of something. There were birthday dinners at the creaky wooden table and lazy summers on the back porch with lemonade and bug spray. That house held everything. Every awkward teenage year, every late-night homework panic, every quiet sibling argument whispered behind closed doors. So when I got the call one Wednesday afternoon that they'd sold it, I just sat there blinking at my phone. "We're downsizing," my mom had said, like it was no big deal. "Your father's knees aren't what they used to be, and we don't need all that space." I remember standing by the window in my office, watching the wind stir up the leaves in the parking lot, and trying to picture the house without us in it. Without the bookshelf that still had my high school trophies. Without Olivia's glittery nail polish stains on the bathroom counter. Without my name etched into the wood of the closet when I thought carving things was cool. It felt wrong. Sudden. And not like something you just casually drop in a phone call with zero warning. I asked if they needed help moving. They said no, it was already done. Asked if I could keep the pantry door. My mom laughed like I was being sentimental. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. People sell homes all the time. Maybe it was just part of growing up. Except I didn't get to grow up. I got left out. The first crack in the downsizing story came from Olivia's Instagram. I wasn't following her anymore. Long story, but a mutual friend had sent me a screenshot. It was one of those hyper-edited, golden hour shots that made everything look like it belonged in a magazine. Her hair was tossed perfectly by the wind. The ocean sparkled in the background. And the caption? "First morning in my new place. Dreams do come true." I stared at the picture, then at the location tag, Seaside View Condos, just off the coast. I knew that complex. I'd handled lease agreements for units there before, and those weren't casual one-bedroom rentals. They were beachfront luxury condos. Modern kitchens, floor-to-ceiling windows, direct access to the beach. Pricey, even on a good day. Definitely not something my sister could afford on her part-time event planning job and daddy's credit card. So I called. No answer. Texted. Nothing. Not from my mom. Not from my dad. Olivia's red receipts popped up, then disappeared. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of lukewarm wine, just staring at my phone screen and trying to put the pieces together. The house. The sudden sale. The brushed-off questions. The radio silence. It didn't make sense, unless it did. Unless the money from our childhood home, the only real inheritance we had, the only tangible proof of where we came from, hadn't gone to downsizing. It had gone to her. I didn't want to believe it. That would mean they'd lied. That they'd sold our home, erased our history, and funded a beach view fantasy for my sister without even thinking of including me. Without even mentioning it. Not a conversation. Not a courtesy call. Not even a heads up. Just a quiet betrayal, dressed up in pleasantries. I spent the next few days playing it over and over in my head. Every family dinner where I'd picked up the tab. Every birthday I'd quietly reminded them to text her for. Every time I told myself I was just imagining the favoritism. But this This wasn't favoritism. This was erasure. 2 weeks later, the family reunion invitation arrived in the mail. One of those glossy flyers my aunt likes to design with cheesy clip art and a fun in the sun font. I almost threw it out. But then I thought, no, I needed to see their faces. Needed to see if they'd even bring it up. If they'd pretend like nothing had happened. If they'd look me in the eye and keep lying. I RSVP'd. Drove the 3 hours with the windows down and the music low. Rented a cheap motel 10 minutes from the lake house. Practiced my smile in the mirror before walking in. And sure enough, the moment I stepped onto the deck, someone handed me a gift bag with a folded card and a $20 gas voucher. My mom smiled like it was some grand gesture. My dad gave me a firm pat on the back. Olivia didn't even look up from her mimosa. No one mentioned the house. No one mentioned the condo. No one mentioned the silence. So I smiled back. And that's when I handed them the envelope I'd brought. Just a plain white one. No clip art. No glitter. Just a single sheet of paper inside. The lease termination notice. Because here's the thing they forgot. 3 years ago, before Olivia even dreamed of ocean views and influencer aesthetics, she couldn't get approved for a lease on her own. Credit too thin. Income too low. Dad asked me to co-sign, just temporarily. Said it was for a starter place. I agreed. Signed the paperwork. Forgot about it. Because that place fell through and they never followed up. Except they had followed up. They just didn't tell me they used the same paperwork again later for the condo. And yes, it was still in my name. But I didn't tell them that yet. Because when my mom opened the envelope and started reading, her smile didn't just fade. It cracked. And right before anyone could say a word, I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove off with the windows up. When I got back to my motel room that night, the adrenaline from the confrontation hadn't worn off. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my dress shirt, staring at my phone as the notifications started pouring in. Missed calls, voicemails, a dozen texts in all caps from Mom. Olivia's name popped up a few times too, but she wasn't using words, just unhinged emojis, mostly the red-faced angry ones, and a single skull. I didn't respond. Not yet. I wanted the silence to settle, to make them stew in it. Let them feel what I'd been feeling for months. Confusion, betrayal, and a growing storm in my chest that I didn't quite know how to name. The lease termination notice wasn't even real, yet. I hadn't submitted anything official to the property manager. Not because I was bluffing, but because I needed to be sure. Needed them to confirm the lie with their own mouths. And after seeing my mom's face crack open like a dropped vase, I knew I'd hit a nerve. The next morning, I went down to the motel lobby for the free continental breakfast, stale croissants, watery coffee, and some yogurt cups that expired 2 days prior. While I picked through the fruit bowl, my phone rang again. This time, it was my dad. Not Dad, like the contact used to be saved. Just his full name, Richard M. Whitaker. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. He sighed. Not an angry sigh, but that tired, performative one he always used when I asked too many questions as a kid. Samuel, what was that stunt about yesterday? I kept my voice even. You read the document? Yes, and you scared your mother half to death. She should be more scared of fraud. He didn't respond right away. I could hear birds in the background, probably standing on the deck again with his morning coffee and the smugness of someone who thought their secrets would stay buried. You don't understand what went into that decision. Enlighten me. Olivia needed a fresh start. She was in a bad place. I pinched the bridge of my nose, leaning back in the chair. She posted a champagne toast to her condo on Instagram. Doesn't look like she's suffering. She was embarrassed. She didn't want to make a big deal about it. No, she just didn't want me to know. He didn't deny it. Just sighed again. Look, he said, we knew you'd react this way. You're always so sensitive when it comes to her. I let that sit for a second. Sensitive. You make everything a competition, Samuel. It's exhausting. She's your sister, right? My sister who got a beachfront condo while I got a gas card. You're not being fair. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the words were so ridiculous they bounced around in my skull like marbles. You sold our house. You didn't tell me. You ghosted me when I asked questions. And now you're lecturing me about fairness? She needed help, Sam. And I didn't. Silence. That was the moment it hit me. The thing I'd never said out loud, not even to myself. All my life, I thought I was just being the responsible one. The independent one. The strong one. But what I really was overlooked. Disposable. Don't call me again, I said. And I hung up. The thing about emotional betrayal is it's not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A slow erosion. 1,000 little paper cuts. And then one day you wake up and realize you're bleeding out. After I left the reunion, I started going back over everything. The birthdays they forgot. The graduation they didn't attend because Olivia had the flu. The Christmas where they spent 3 hours at her boyfriend's party and only showed up to my place for 15 minutes because the roads were icy. The time Mom gave her the keys to the old family SUV. The same one she told me had too many issues to be worth keeping. I even remembered the little things, like how they only ever framed one school photo in the living room. Olivia's 8th grade dance portrait. Mine never made the cut. And I think what hurt the most wasn't just the favoritism. It was the fact that I'd accepted it for so long. I'd made excuses, rationalized it, told myself I was being dramatic, that they loved us equally, just in different ways. What a joke. About a week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a call. A literal envelope with a pastel stamp and my mom's loopy handwriting on the front. Inside was a single sheet of floral stationery. Samuel, we're sorry things have gotten so tense between us. That was never our intention. You've always been so smart and self-sufficient. We didn't think you needed as much from us. Olivia, on the other hand, has had a harder time lately, which you wouldn't understand because you've always been more private. The condo was a gesture of support, not favoritism. We used the house money because we thought it would make a difference in her life. You have your career, your own place. You've never asked us for anything. That's why we assumed you were fine. Please don't do anything drastic. Let's talk. Love. Mom. No signature from Dad. Just Mom. Like she was writing a note to a distant relative, not her son. I crumpled the letter and sat on it for a full day before replying. And my reply wasn't a letter. It was a screenshot of an email chain between me and the Seaside View property manager. The subject line? Notice of intent to remove cosigner from lease. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But I wanted them to know I could. That the foundation they'd built their little lie on was standing on my shoulders, and I could shrug any time I wanted. And then came the twist that finally broke me. About 2 weeks after the reunion, I got a call from Olivia. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Her voice was tight. Not angry this time, desperate. Hey, can you just listen for a second? I didn't say anything. I know you're pissed. I get it. But this wasn't my idea. Still silent. Mom and Dad made the offer. They said the house was going to go anyway, and that it was better if at least one of us got something out of it. I finally spoke. And you didn't think to ask if I was okay with that? She exhaled sharply, like I was the one being unreasonable. Sam, you never needed them. You've always been the golden boy with the job and the law degree and the perfect life. I was drowning. I nearly choked. Golden boy. Are you serious? You think I don't notice how they talk about you? How they brag about your career? How every time I mess up, they say, why can't you be more like Samuel? You think that doesn't mess with me? I blinked. The gears in my brain ground to a halt. That was the narrative? That I was the favorite? Olivia, they sold the house and gave you everything. What exactly do you think I got out of this family? She paused, just for a second. Then she said the line that finally snapped something in me. Maybe if you weren't always so cold, they would have included you. Click. She hung up. And just like that, I was done. Not hurt. Not confused. Not even angry. Done. I'd spent years holding my breath in a room where no one even noticed I was suffocating. I was the one who called on holidays. The one who drove hours for birthdays. The one who sent money when Olivia's internship fell through, only to find out it was actually a Coachella trip gone wrong. And in return, I got gas cards and guilt trips. That night, I sat down at my desk, opened the lease agreement for Seaside View, and reread every clause, every line, every footnote. And when I reached the cosigner section, I double-checked the timeline. The moment my name had been used again, without consent, was clear as day. They had forged the date, backdated my signature to an old approval form. A clever move, but not clever enough for someone who reads contracts for a living. That was the moment the betrayal became something else. It became actionable. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, because I was calculating. And the next day, I made the first of several quiet phone calls. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't even going to warn them. But I was going to remind them who they underestimated. And just when I thought I was ready to act, something else happened that made it all worse. Something I hadn't planned for. Something I never saw coming. Let's just say the condo. It wasn't the only thing tied to my name. I wish I could say that after that phone call with Olivia, I felt powerful, like I was in control again. But the truth is, when I hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall. My apartment, normally quiet in a comforting way, suddenly felt hollow. The hum of the fridge, the ticking wall clock, everything sounded too loud, too empty. It wasn't the betrayal itself that crushed me. It was the slow realization that I didn't just lose a house. I'd lost the illusion of family. And that's when everything else started to crack. A week after I started digging through the condo lease paperwork, I got a letter in the mail. Not from Mom this time, from the HOA at Seaside View. Apparently, there had been unresolved complaints regarding noise, unauthorized guests, and minor property damage. Since I was still listed as a financial party on the lease, I was also legally accountable for any fines incurred. The total so far? $1,125. I just sat on the floor with the letter in my lap and laughed. Of course it wasn't enough for them to use my name. They had to drag it through the mud, too. The next day, I called the property manager again, this time asking for all documentation tied to the unit. Every invoice, every complaint, every maintenance request. I wanted receipts, and not just metaphorical ones. When the PDF arrived in my inbox, I made coffee and opened it like I was reviewing a client case. What I saw inside didn't surprise me, but it still hit hard. Late rent payments, unauthorized alterations. Someone had installed LED light strips across the ceiling and drilled into the balcony railing for a makeshift hammock. Complaints from neighbors about unregistered parties and shouting matches at odd hours. There were even pictures attached. One of the front door, which had been artistically painted a pale pink with Olivia's initials in gold cursive. Another of the kitchen trash can overflowing with empty wine bottles. And yet another of a barefoot guy passed out in a beach chair on the patio. And every single one of these infractions came with my name on the notice. That night, something inside me finally snapped into place. Not the broken kind of snap, the opposite. Like a bone setting after months of being dislocated. I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. But that didn't mean I had to play the villain. Not yet. Instead of firing off angry emails or threatening legal action, I did something unexpected. I started cleaning house. Quietly. Methodically. I canceled the old co-signer authorization and filed a formal dispute on the forged lease extension. That froze the lease under review. No changes. No rent processed. No new keys issued. The condo was essentially in limbo. I didn't even tell them. Then I started pulling away from the emotional wreckage. I muted our family group chat, the one that still had pictures of Olivia's condo warming party, but never once mentioned the reunion fallout. I unfollowed all of them on Instagram. I removed myself from the shared cloud album my mom had set up back in 2019 titled Whitaker Family Memories. I started walking more. Just walking. Mornings, mostly. Sometimes with music, sometimes without. I found a trail near my apartment that wound through a little patch of woods. It wasn't much, but it was quiet, and it didn't ask anything of me. Around that same time, I started spending more evenings at the office. Not because I had extra work, I just didn't want to go home. But a funny thing happened while I was killing time. I started getting ahead. I cleared backlogs, reviewed contracts with fresh eyes, helped a junior associate fix a tricky tenant dispute. One day, my supervisor pulled me aside. "You've been on fire lately," she said. "Everything okay?" I gave a half smile. Just focused. And she nodded, like she understood more than I said. A month later, I was offered a lead position on a new housing compliance initiative, something we'd been circling for a while, but hadn't had the staff to fully launch. It came with a bonus and a quiet corner office. I didn't post about it. Didn't tell my parents. Didn't even mention it to my closest friends. I just savored it. Quietly. There was something deeply healing about becoming the person I'd always hoped I could be. Not for approval, not for praise, but just for myself. I started budgeting more seriously. Saved every extra cent, cut unnecessary subscriptions. I even started reading again, fiction, mostly. Stories about people who rebuilt after ruin. Characters who lost everything only to find something better in the silence that followed. And then, one weekend, I did something I hadn't done since college. I drove back to the old neighborhood. Sycamore Lane. The house was already sold. New curtains in the windows. fresh coat of paint on the porch. The oak tree was still there, though. Still tall. Still stubborn. I parked a little ways down the street and just watched from my car, sipping a takeout coffee, letting the memories roll over me like gentle waves. That house wasn't mine anymore, but the person who had grown up inside it, he still was. And for the first time in months, I let myself grieve. I grieved the pantry door with the height marks, the echo of my dad's old record player on lazy Sundays, the way Mom used to hum when she folded laundry, the smell of rain in the backyard, the sound of Olivia's laugh, back when we were kids and still believed we'd always be each other's best friend. I cried. I'm not ashamed to say that. Quietly, in the driver's seat, with the windows rolled up and the world moving on around me. I cried for the boy who thought love was something you had to earn. I cried for the man who learned too late that some people will always hold an eraser in one hand, even as they draw you into their lives with the other. And then I went home. And I kept rising. I started therapy. Nothing dramatic, just once a week, with a soft-spoken guy named Leo who wore beige cardigans and let me ramble without judgment. He never rushed me, never gave canned advice, just asked questions that lingered in my mind long after the session ended. Like, why do you keep expecting them to change? And what would it look like to stop performing worthiness? Little by little, I let go of the anger. Not all of it. Not right away, but enough to breathe. Enough to rebuild. Then one night, as I was organizing my files, I stumbled across a strange document buried in a folder labeled Whitaker Property. I opened it absent-mindedly and froze. It was a warranty deed to a piece of land on the outskirts of town, in my name, but I'd never seen it before. At first, I thought it was a clerical error. Then I checked the date. It was dated 3 years ago, transferred from Richard and Margaret Whitaker, my parents, to me. I checked the county database. It was real. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. My parents had transferred a parcel of land to me years ago, a wooded plot, undeveloped but sizable, and never told me. No phone call, no letter, nothing. Why? Because it was a tax move. That's what I eventually learned after doing some digging. They'd offloaded the land to avoid capital gains and used my name because I had the cleanest credit. I was never supposed to do anything with it. Just another tool in their financial chess game. Just another signature. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't about the condo. It wasn't even about Olivia. It was about control. About being useful. And now I was done being used. Because that plot of land, it had value. Not just sentimental, financial. The area had started developing, slowly but steadily. Real estate groups had started making offers. And if I played it right, I could turn it into something far more powerful than a silent betrayal. I could turn it into leverage. The kind you don't announce. The kind you wait with. And then, just when they think the dust has settled and they've won, you show them who really owns the game. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the real trigger, the final betrayal, the one that pushed everything past the point of no return, was still coming. And when it arrived, it didn't come with shouting. It came with silence. A silence so loud, I still hear it echo when I close my eyes. I didn't act right away. That's the part they'd never understand. Not my parents, not Olivia. They were impulsive. Everything they did was reactive. They made decisions in the moment and cleaned up the mess later. That was their pattern. Mine. I was patient. I didn't just react. I watched, I waited, and when I moved, it was with purpose. And I was about to move. But first, I needed more than righteous anger. I needed facts, receipts, paper trails. Because if I was going to end this, really end this, it had to be clean. No room for deniability. No way for them to slither out with teary apologies or that worn-out line about me being too sensitive. So I started with the land. I pulled every record attached to that property. County filings, deeds, old tax documents. I even paid for an expedited title history. And the more I found, the clearer it became. My parents had used me as a financial buffer more than once. The land transfer was just the largest, but there were smaller things too. A few utilities set up in my name for properties I never lived in. A bank account that had my name listed as a co-owner, which was closed a year later without my knowledge. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't run my own personal audit. I felt like I was unraveling a ball of yarn no one thought I'd ever find. But here's the twist. I wasn't angry anymore. I was sharp, focused. Because I had finally figured out my role in their story, I was never the black sheep. I was the foundation. the one who held the structure up without being seen. And now that I had stepped back, everything was collapsing. So I made a plan. First, I consulted a colleague, Tanya, from my firm. She specialized in real estate fraud and had the kind of mind that could slice through legal jargon like a scalpel. I didn't give her all the details, just enough to paint a picture. Family forged documents, co-signed lease without permission, tax evasion via unnotified land transfer. She whistled low after reading the files. Want my honest advice? I nodded. You have enough here to sue them into oblivion. But you don't have to go nuclear. You can hold this over them like a sword. That's the power of knowing you can end someone's game at any moment, without even playing the final card. I nodded slowly. That's what I want. I don't want to ruin them. I want them to know I could. She smiled. Then let's build your leverage. And we did. Over the next few weeks, I gathered everything. We drafted a formal fraud complaint, complete with notarized annotations on the forged cosigner lease. I documented the forged signatures, got a digital forensics expert to confirm that the date stamps had been tampered with. I pulled the HOA fines and formal warnings tied to the condo and attached them to my financial liability report. I even obtained the original messages from the property manager when Olivia moved in, messages where they thanked Samuel for co-signing again. We created a legal folder titled Whitaker Family Irregularities. It had subfolders, color-coded. Meanwhile, I visited the land. That empty plot they'd dumped into my name like a trash bin for tax avoidance? It had grown in value. The area around it had become a hotbed for eco-home developments. And guess who had quietly bought the land adjacent? A small architectural firm. When I showed them my deed and hinted that I might be willing to sell, the guy lit up. He said they'd been trying to buy up that whole strip for months. We'd love to keep everything uniform, he said. If you ever decide to move forward, we can offer above market. I smiled and gave him my card. You'll be the first call I make. I wasn't just holding leverage anymore. I was stacking it. Then came the final piece, Olivia's lease. Legally, I couldn't just kick her out overnight, even with my name on the contract. But I could start the process, especially now that I had proof the extension was done fraudulently. Tanya helped me prepare a formal withdrawal of cosigner consent, and once it was submitted, it would trigger a mandatory lease review. The result? Olivia would have to requalify on her own. And considering her debt-to-income ratio and spotty payment history, she wouldn't. But I didn't submit the paperwork just yet, because I wanted her to see it coming. I wanted all of them to see it. So I waited. And then, by sheer cosmic coincidence, or maybe just the universe having a sense of humor, I got a text from my aunt. Family barbecue this weekend at my place. Hope you can make it, Sam. Everyone's excited to see you again. Everyone. I almost laughed out loud. It had been months since the reunion, since I handed them the envelope, since the calls stopped, since I stepped out of their orbit. And now suddenly, a barbecue? I didn't respond right away. But that night, I poured myself a drink and opened my laptop. If they wanted me there, I'd go. But not to eat ribs and swap stories about vacations. I was bringing receipts. I RSVP'd with a single word, sure. And then I got to work. I printed copies of the forged lease extension, highlighted the inconsistencies. I prepared a timeline of their financial use of my name, from the land deed to the condo. I even included screenshots from Olivia's Instagram stories, where she casually boasted about owning my dream place thanks to the fam. There was something poetic about using her own filter-ridden captions as evidence. Then I bought a new outfit. Not flashy, just clean, sharp. A pale blue button-up, dark slacks, polished shoes. The kind of thing that made you look calm and competent, like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to reveal. Saturday came fast. The barbecue was held at my aunt's place, a sprawling suburban home with a trampoline in the yard and a glittering pool that hadn't been used since her kids moved out. The driveway was full. Laughter spilled out from the backyard like smoke. I parked a block away, walked slowly, taking in the warm air and the sound of distant conversation. When I stepped through the side gate and into the yard, a few people glanced up, and then looked away just as quickly. That was fine. I wasn't here to make small talk. I was here to make them listen. Mom was near the grill with Aunt Karen, flipping burgers like nothing had happened. Dad was nursing a beer by the lawn chairs. Olivia? She was at the pool, lounging in a sunflower print bikini, phone in hand, taking a boomerang of her sparkling water clink. I waited, ate nothing, drank nothing, just observed. Then, right around dessert, When everyone was full and slow, and the mood was syrupy with sugar and sun, I made my move. I walked up to the folding table, clinked my glass with a fork, and cleared my throat. A few people turned. Most didn't. "Hey," I said casually. "Just wanted to say thanks for the invite. It's been a while since I've seen everyone." Mom turned, smiling politely. "We're glad you came, sweetie." Olivia barely looked up. "Didn't think you'd show, honestly." I nodded. "Yeah, well, I've been busy. Cleaning up some paperwork. Following some threads." Dad frowned. "What kind of threads?" I pulled the manila folder from under my arm and set it on the table. "This kind." I opened it. Slowly. Deliberately. The first page? A photo of Olivia's condo front door, pink paint, gold cursive. The second? The forged lease extension, with highlighted timestamps and my initials marked beside it, except I never signed it. The third? A notarized letter from Tanya, verifying digital forgery and filing a formal notice of withdrawal. Olivia sat up. "What is this?" Mom stepped forward. "Samuel, let's not do this here." "No," I said. "Let's." I flipped another page, the land deed. My name. Their signatures. A dated email where my father admitted the transfer was temporary, just for paperwork purposes. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't look around for validation. I just stood there and let the document speak. "You've used me," I said finally, softly. "Over and over again. And I let you. I let it slide when you gave Olivia the car, the money, the house sale proceeds. I let it slide when you ghosted me after selling our childhood home. I let it slide when you forged my signature to get her a beachfront condo." Olivia stood now, red-faced. "I didn't know." I held up a hand. "This isn't about what you knew. This is about what I know now." Dad opened his mouth. Closed it. "I could take this to court," I said. "I could press charges. Sue for damages. Your signatures are on official documents, and I have proof. But I'm not doing that. Not yet." I let the silence stretch. Mom looked pale. "I just wanted you to see what I've been carrying. To see your own actions, in ink and time-stamped. I want you to know that I have all of this. And if you ever try to use my name again, even once, I won't hold back next time." I closed the folder. Olivia stared at me, lips parted. "So what now?" I smiled faintly. "Now," I said. "Now we wait." Because what they didn't know was this. The paperwork was already in motion. The lease was being reviewed. Olivia would get the official notice by the end of the week. And the land? Well, let's just say the architects were very interested. But I didn't tell them that yet. 2 days after the barbecue, the notice went out. I didn't send it myself. The property manager did. A formal letter, standard language, no frills. Just a clear and legal notification that the lease for Unit 4B at Seaside View was under immediate review due to co-signer withdrawal and verification discrepancies. Olivia would need to requalify as the sole leaseholder within 10 business days or vacate the premises. I imagined the moment she read it. Probably sitting on her Instagrammable couch, drink in hand, scrolling past bikini ads and sponsored posts, when she opened her email and felt her stomach drop. That moment when your carefully curated life starts to unravel, and you realize the person you dismissed, the one you called cold, the one you said didn't need anything, just pulled the only rug you had left. And this time, there was no one to blame but herself. She tried, of course. The calls came in waves. First a text. "You can't be serious. WTF is this?" Then a voicemail, her voice tight with forced calm. "Samuel, this is ridiculous. Just call me and we can talk about it, okay? This is going too far." And then, pure panic. "They're saying I need to move out. I can't move out. I've got stuff here. My job. My clients. What am I supposed to do? What job? What clients?" She planned events for influencer weddings and beach yoga meetups, half of which she got through hashtags and charm. She didn't have steady income. She had a lifestyle. And lifestyles, as I've learned, are fragile things when they're built on someone else's name. I didn't respond. Because there was nothing to say. The final decision from the property manager came back a few days later. Her application to assume full responsibility for the lease had been denied. Poor credit. Unstable income. Insufficient savings. Her eviction date was set, 30 days. I watched it all unfold without lifting a finger. No gloating. No confrontation. Just silence. It hit my parents not long after. I didn't tell them about the lease decision. I let Olivia do that herself. From what I later learned through a mutual cousin, she called our mom in tears, screaming about How could he do this to me? And he's destroying my life. And for once, Mom didn't jump to rescue her. Because here's the thing about power. Once you show people you're willing to use it, they start treading lightly. Especially when you've documented every misstep. Especially when you've spent months preparing. That same week, I met again with the architectural firm interested in the land. We went over the terms. They offered a figure that made me sit back in my chair. Above market. Way above. They wanted the whole block, and mine was the last missing piece. I asked for time to think, not because I needed it, but because leverage is sweeter when savored. And then I did one final thing before signing. I sent an email to my parents. Simple. Direct. Dear Mom and Dad, just wanted to inform you that the land you transferred into my name, the one you never told me about, is being sold to a private firm next month. The sale will be reported, and tax disclosures will reflect the original transfer date. Any audit that results from the gap in declarations is, unfortunately, your responsibility. I've also contacted the county to formally disassociate my name from any utilities or financial liabilities tied to you or Olivia moving forward. I wish you both well. Samuel. No accusations. No apologies. Just facts. They didn't reply. I didn't expect them to. But a week later, a letter arrived. No stamp. Hand-delivered, probably by my dad. Just slid under my apartment door in the middle of the night. Inside was a single sheet of white paper. No, dear Samuel. Just, you made your point. Congratulations. R&M. That was it. That was the fallout. No confrontation. No cathartic apology. Just silence. And in some twisted way, that silence was the apology. Because for the first time in my life, they had nothing left to say. Olivia's Instagram went dark for a while. No news stories. No beach shots. Then, weeks later, she posted a selfie in a cramped apartment with beige walls and bad lighting. The caption read, "New beginnings. Just me, myself, and I." No mention of what happened. No mention of who helped her get there, or who didn't. I didn't like the post. Didn't comment. Didn't even open it again. Instead, I closed the deal on the land. Took the payout and invested half. Used the rest for a down payment on a quiet little property just outside the city. Not beachfront, not flashy, but mine. Real wood floors. Big kitchen. A sunlit office where I could read and work and drink coffee without the weight of ghosts pressing against my chest. The day I moved in, I found an old photo album tucked in a box I hadn't opened in years. Childhood pictures. Me and Olivia under the oak tree. Mom braiding her hair. Dad grilling burgers with a beer in hand. A family that looked happy, or at least looked like it was trying. I closed the album gently and slid it into a drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, but because some stories are only meant to be read once. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was a quiet severing. A reminder that the strongest power isn't destruction. It's choice. The choice to walk away. To live without their permission. To stop proving your worth to people who never saw it in the first place. And as I stood on my new porch, mug in hand, watching the sun rise over a yard that I owned, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. Peace. Real peace. Not the fragile kind built on staying quiet, but the kind you build yourself, brick by brick, choice by choice, until no one else gets to hold the pen to your story. They sold my childhood home to buy her a view of the ocean, but I bought something better. A life they can't touch, and I didn't need their permission to do it. I just smiled and closed the door.